Okay, so welcome to, I guess, a kind of a reboot for our Good Craic conversations that began a number of years ago. And uh, what we are hoping to do now is talk to as many amazing people as we can. And of course, no one is more amazing than our dear friend Shonagh Home. Um, and we are so looking to have some conversations and more of these sort of things going on. So Good Craic, of course, Good Craic is the Gaelic term for good conversation, especially uplifting conversation. And it's most, I guess, they still use the term in Ireland.
For sure.
Craic sounds like other kinds of crack, but this is the real crack. And we're looking forward to talking to Shonagh. So welcome everybody. And actually, like I say, Shonagh Home. I'm Stephen Crimi, and this is Krys Crimi. I suppose we should barely introduce ourselves.
Yes. Yes.
We're going to. Shonagh is published by Logosophia Books, so we're going to have Logosophia Books
Which just
be the
happens to be our
sponsor of the
sponsor,
video.
even though we're the publishers. So
So
we would like to say that this is sponsored by Logosophia Books, and you can find us at logosophiabooks.com. And one of our favorite books is the one that Steve wrote himself called Katabatic Wind. And this was a collection of essays that Steve wrote. So you want to just say a few words about that, Steve?
Yeah, so it's a collection of essays. Katabasis is the ancient Greek word for the underground journey. So that is sort of the unifying theme in looking at Greek and Indian mythologies and this whole idea of where the wisdom is found underground, which is very close to what we're going to be talking about with Shonagh today, where her title of her book is Poetic Whispers from the Cauldron of the Underworld. So
Otherworld.
Otherworld. What did I say?
Underworld.
Underworld. It's
No,
Well, we'll straighten that out
I
later.
try to say Otherworld. And so we're looking at really, the source of the sacred as it manifests in this world. So anyway, so that's my book. It came out in 2016. I'll have another one coming out sometime, hopefully by midsummer.
Yes.
Is when I think this is going to be ready and out.
And its title
And its
is?
title is Hermes Runs the Game, and it's about the COVID as an inverted Greek sacrificial ritual and how it mapped onto it the whole 3 years of COVID. And I pretty much threw everything in including the kitchen
Everything's in
sink
there. Yeah.
is in there. So anyway,
So
that's good.
logosophiabooks.com.
So welcome, Shonagh.
Thank you for indulging us.
Oh, this is gonna be great.
We're just like,
So
let's have fun with this.
So we've been friends with Shonagh for a bit, and Logosophia is very, very happy to publish her new book, Poetic Whispers from the Cauldron of the Otherworld. And with one of the few things that make this book special, and there's really kind of like three levels to the book. All right, so the book is this poetry that comes through Shonagh that is very, as we say, incantatory, and which means that they're an incantation. They come from a particular source, but they also lead you back to that source. And that's what makes sacred poetry special from the Rig Veda on. I mean, that was the whole point of it, was to be chanting from the place, and then that gives you access back to that place. And that's the tradition that Shonagh emerges from. The second part of the book, there's also a lot about the Celtic bardic tradition in a very scholarly fashion that Shonagh writes. And there are a number of illustrations and the various things that she talks about is the bardic tradition, the poetic tradition, the learning tradition of the Gaelic Celtic bards. And then the third part is that there are aspects of Shonagh's own story, woven in through all this.
Which
And
that's fun.
so it's so it doesn't get pigeonholed easily. You know, when you're putting a title up on Amazon, you have to come up with the genre and things like that. So it covers a lot of ground, and that's one of the things that makes this book unique and, you know, we think special, of course. So I think that's enough of introduction.
Yeah. So I guess we were wanting to ask, people love to know stories. We thrive on stories. So would you begin with your personal story and just a bit of a bio?
Sure.
Who are you? What formative forces came into play to bring you to where you are today?
Okay, well, I started in Toronto, and my family was Irish Catholic, and my mom's mother, my grandma Flood, she was from Belfast, Ireland.
Oh, really? Did you
Yes.
tell me that?
I don't think I did, because I forgot exactly. I was like, where is she from again? And I asked my
Wait a
mom,
minute.
Belfast.
Because you know that's where my family's from.
Yes, yes, yes. And so she was
Wow.
shot at as a girl with, you know, all the troubles, as
The
they call them,
troubles.
the
So was my cousin.
understatement. Yes, yes. So she was an incredible storyteller. And so when we were little, she had that accent, and she would speak very
So good.
softly, and she would tell us these fairy stories, including stories of the banshee. And I think that's where I just developed my love for the fairy, because as a child, we were in downtown Toronto, and so there was a library nearby, maybe a few blocks away. And so I would walk to the North York Public Library, and I found Andrew Lang's books on fairy tales.
Oh,
They're collected fairy tales from all over. This is not Disney garbage. These are beautiful old fairy tales, and the illustrations were just captivating. And they were in hardcover, so it was the orange fairy book, the blue fairy book, on and on and on. And he and his wife put these collected these tales and put them together. And that just captivated me. And it turned out also, as a child, I was very sensitive. So I was clairsentient, so I could feel things. And I was claircognizant, so I would know things. And then I proceeded to go to a convent school run by nuns through 7th grade. And if I'd stayed there, I would have gone on, you know, Catholic all the way.
so was that a live-in
Pardon me?
school? Was that a live-in school? Did you
No,
live
it wasn't a
there, like
live-in
boarding?
school.
No, it was.
No, it wasn't a boarding school. No, 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 no. But it was the Ursuline school, and it's no longer there.
You mentioned that, yeah, had the Ursuline nuns up until 8th grade in New York City.
Yeah.
And I had the Josephites till 8th grade on Long Island.
Yes, and you know, God bless those women. I mean, some of them were holy terrors, and others were just gems, you know. And
Angelic. Yeah. I
yeah,
remember was Sister Mary Angela. She was like an angel.
yeah. And you know, it's interesting because I just know fate is at work for all of us individually. And because I went to that school, we had something, it started in 1st grade. I had it 1st grade through 7th grade. It was called speech arts, and it was twice a week. And my teacher was this beautiful lady, Pauline Prentice. I just thought she was so beautiful. And well, we had to recite poetry. And so I competed at the Peel Festival as a child and won
Interesting.
2 golds and a bronze, speaking to these huge audiences. And then
Oh,
we had to write speeches, and then some of us would be selected to give the speech to the school. So I was one of those kids. And so I had a little training
I would
as
say.
a child that was really helpful, and also gave me an appreciation, of course, for poetry. But I forgot really all about that until I started doing the research for my book on the training of the seer poets of old Ireland, and it kind of blew me away. So in any case, so that was Canada, and then we moved to Connecticut. And when we moved to Connecticut, that we bought a newly built house, but it was built, the whole area. They said by Indian burial grounds. Don't tell me they built those houses, right? I promise you they did.
Oh,
Come on, making money, they don't care.
no,
So we had a ghost in that house, and it was a native man. And I didn't know that, but my mom, who was Irish, she's still alive, has the gift. She didn't, use it often, but she's very psychic, and she saw that ghost. Yeah, and
so what,
So she saw the image of it. Of him.
yeah, oh yeah,
So-
yeah.
did she describe the person as a native person?
Yes, and this was later because we were there for 3 years and we never discussed it because I would feel him. And because I was a strange kid, and I would get up at 5:30 in the morning, which I still do, and I would work out. I started running in 8th grade, and yeah, so I just did that for many years. But I would be the only one awake, and I would feel a presence. Like, you feel someone, you turn around and there they are, but no one would be there. That would
Mhm.
freak me out. And my mother, of course, never mentioned it because, hey, we just didn't talk about it. And so it wasn't until we moved, and I don't remember even how we started talking about it, but I do remember when we moved to the new house, which was in a different town, and I was 15, I walked through the entire house. And again, didn't say anything to anyone, feeling the house.
Interesting.
Now, I look at living in that haunted house as kind of training.
Mhm.
So, because we all have that ability, we all have that sixth sense, but some of us, it's already quite well formed, if you will. And for others, you're in a situation where you don't even realize it,
Right.
but you've got to develop it in the same way that, what were you saying?
Did you have siblings?
Yes, I'm the eldest of 4 kids.
So
So I have
did,
a younger
did your
sister.
brothers or sisters have any experience with that
No,
visitation?
No.
None,
none,
just
nothing.
you and your mom.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So anyway, so I look at that as kind of training because it made me very sensitive, sort of feeling in a room. And then also, I should say, when we were in Toronto, there were 2 beautiful trees. There was a birch and, oh gosh, I forget the name of the tree. I think it was an alder. And that alder tree, oh my God, I love that tree. And I would sit, there was a branch that came out, and I'd have to sort of climb on a rock, and I would sit on that branch and I would hang out there for
Hmm.
hours.
Yeah.
And that tree would communicate with me, but wasn't with the English language, but it was all felt. And I had that experience again when we moved to
Mm.
Seattle, with a tree.
Where?
Seattle.
Oh, Seattle.
Yeah, that was, later when I hit 40. But yeah, so anyway, that sensitivity. And so sadly, in this construct that we're in, right, that's all dismissed or pathologized. Like, it's just, you're made to feel like you're kind of strange, but yet it's as human and natural and organic as it gets.
Mhm.
And so anyway, so I had that growing up.
Right. Well, isn't it true that those experiences that you have where you're connecting with the other world feel more real than quotidian, existence?
Well, because they're more immediate, I think. They're,
Well,
Yeah.
and
also
interior.
and also it's the hidden dimension emerges that we're always connected to those realms, but
Yes.
but you drive in a car, you really don't want to be all that connected,
Well, it's like
So-
the ground, I suppose, like the ground
Yeah.
of being.
And children are usually more naturally connected anyway, right? There's many a story, right?
Yes,
A
yeah.
child, when you're talking to their imaginary friend.
I had one.
Yeah, I did too. So yeah, so all of that was, really developing me. And you know what the other one was, and I talk about this because I think it's really important, at least in my case. When we moved to the States, I was bullied. I did not fit in
Mm.
because I went from like a little convent school run by nuns
Right.
to public school. And you
Mhm.
want to talk about culture shock. And this
Mhm.
was in like 1977 or something. And it was, it was crazy. And so I went from A student down to C's and D's. And then I was a cutter
Really?
for a while, like I was a mess.
But
And
what kind of bullying? How did that express? What happened?
a lot of,
And why?
mockery and phone calls,
Oh.
from kids, mean kids saying things and
What
accusing
was
me.
the pretext? Why,
Okay, well, because I was a total dork and I didn't know, socially, and okay, looking back, I'm like, I actually think I'm kind of socially awkward. I think
oh,
I kind of have been. No, it's all good. I can laugh at myself.
fine.
I was trying desperately to fit in,
Yeah.
desperately, and I didn't know, like, I just, was completely unsophisticated with kind of how that works because I was not exposed to it. And I was at this tiny school, and everyone was friends. And so, and different things like whatever, being tripped and, when everyone's going into the school,
Really?
the books flying
Yeah.
and different things. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. It was rough.
Oh,
I, but what it did was, I was an outlier. And as painful as that is when you're a kid, because all you want to do is fit in, and believe me, I tried everything I could think of. But it frees you because at some point it just kind of hits you like, you know what? All right, no one cares. So what's going on over here? And so then you can explore
okay.
other areas.
Good.
And no one's gonna, I don't know, give you a hard time for it. It's not like you have to stick with kind of what the group is doing, right? Because we're tribal.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there's so much peer pressure in schools for kids for all manner of things. And so it really, yeah, it freed me so that at some point you don't care what people are going to say
Well, that's
anymore.
a huge
Just,
thing, right?
hmm?
Not caring what people think about you. I mean, that's a lifelong learning.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And you think about whatever the mass compliance and the lockdowns and
Right.
things like that. What was it about? I mean, why were people afraid to go against their own best interests and their best, and their whatever and their inner wisdom, because they were stuck on that, on that compliance train.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. And I'm an Aries woman, and my motto is, you're not the boss of me.
Good.
And that's been to my detriment at times because, we can also be reckless. Thank God I'm 61 now and I've learned a few things and tempered a little bit. But yeah, no way, no way, no way. No, government and corporations, that's the last
Good.
place
Good.
where I'm gonna listen and, anyway, whatever. So that's a whole
Well,
other
that person is so badly needed today.
yes.
So maybe there's a future role for you as a role model. Well, not even by design, just by default.
Yes. Well, I'll tell you what else has so helped me around that time is prior to that, I was making a study of the trivium and the logical fallacies. And just this discovery of like, oh my God, my ignorance, most of us, it's just like jaw dropping. Like, why were we not taught this in
Could you
school?
talk a little bit about that? Because I don't know about the trivium and
Well, the
the
trivium is this
fallacies.
kind of classical education. So it's grammar, logic, and rhetoric. And so
Right.
grammar, and I think I did get a little bit of this in my convent school, and I know I did, obviously I did. But so it's the structure of language, right? And how to form words. And it's all, and also, by the
Huh.
way, seer poets of old Ireland, I'll kind of dip back into that as well. They had 12 years of training in those first few
right.
years. It was foundational. And so they learned, the structure of, grammar, poetry, all of that, right?
Yeah.
So it's 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 the foundation of education.
And the
And
Catholic schools were good for that.
yes, they were.
They
Yes.
were very good for discipline, personal discipline,
Mhm.
and the structural underpinnings of grammar and such.
Yeah. Discipline didn't work on me, just by the way. I was very naughty. But anyway, I'm not
But
going
you were
into
exposed to it, and and you have your own
we-
personal discipline
we all
because of
got
it.
we all got thwacked on the knuckles
yes.
every once in
Oh
a while.
boy. Oh my God, yeah. So anyway, so there's grammar and then logic. Then it's your ability to be able to kind of parse through the grammar, whether it's spoken or written, and go, all right, are there any inconsistencies here? You know, and so it's critical thinking.
Exactly.
Is what it is. You know,
Exactly, right?
think
That's what's
critically.
lost, right?
Yeah, you're not just like
No, yeah.
accepting it at face value, which everybody does nowadays because of the schooling. And I would urge people to listen on YouTube to John Taylor Gatto, who was an educator for 40 years in the public school system. And then he quit and he spent the rest of his life exposing the system. And he never taught the way teachers were kind of supposed to teach anyway. And he has all kinds of stories about that. But he calls it schooling. He doesn't call it education. It's a Prussian education system. And I don't remember the episode on my podcast, but I did an episode called Crowds, Propaganda, State Schooling. Oh my. And so I talk about Gatto and psychology of crowds, Gustave Le Bon, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, so I had that study. And then rhetoric is your ability, then of course, to speak to it eloquently, astutely, whatever you want to call it, right? And then the logical fallacies, in order to figure out what the inconsistencies maybe are in that person's argument or the flaws in their argument, you have a list of flaws, and they're called the logical fallacies. And they're in Latin and in English, because this is very old. And so the most common one that everyone will recognize today is ad hominem, which is Latin for attack the man.
Yes.
So as you well know, we used to be able to just regular people used to be able to have an argument, a good old fashioned argument, and then just agree to disagree. And then we'll just argue about who's buying lunch, you know, like that's okay.
Right.
And nowadays, that's not the case. But this is all through conditioning and the mind control of schooling, television, the internet, social media, right? So people get emotional and then they start calling each other names. So if you and I are having a tete-a-tete and you make a point and I don't agree or like it, and I call you a name or a term. And because no one has been educated in this, because if they were, we wouldn't have this nonsense. If they were educated in this, be like, whoa, hang on a second. You know, that's an ad hominem. What's your counterpoint? Do you have a counterpoint or not? Because if you don't, we're done.
You can't call people.
That's simple.
Right. You can't call people on it if you don't know it. And
Right.
of course, as we know, the Marxist education system is emotional learning, and it's probably called emotional learning or something along those lines. Whereas it's not, 6 + 6 = 12. It's how do you feel about 6 + 6 = 12? I was like, no, if I'm measuring something to build, I should know how to use a ruler. And the ruler doesn't care how I feel about it. You just need to work with the numbers to get the result, otherwise, things like Chartres Cathedral don't get built.
Yeah, I think it's very good that you were able to articulate the trivium. Some people may have heard of it, some may not have, but I've certainly heard of it. I've never read it, but I didn't know about the argument part at the end, about the fallacy part.
Yeah,
that's so very useful as a tool.
Right.
Oh yeah, there's also something called appeal to emotion, and that's also done throughout the COVID. And so it's like that's your argument.
Well,
Or appeal to authority, like for instance, follow the science. What the hell does that mean?
Yeah.
What the hell does that even mean? Oh no, I follow the science.
Right. No, you don't.
It's not an argument.
No, you don't. Yeah, well, that's it. And understanding logic, learning logic, you learn about the presuppositions, the whatever it is, the things that the statements are based on. I can't remember logical language at the moment, but you'd have a presupposition, if this, then this, but if you understand that, so and then people, and Plato got into this heavily because he hated the sophists, who were teaching actually rhetoric. And of course, even back then, they had these manipulative things that they were using to get people to agree with them.
Yep.
And you studied it so as not to be swayed by them, by the masses, by the science, by all that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'm going to tie that back to the beginning of the Bible. God said the word, and oh God, I don't know how. And God said the word, and the word was.
In the beginning was the word,
In
and
the
the
beginning
word
was
was
the
with
word.
God, and the word was God.
The word was God.
The
Exactly.
logos.
So yes, the logo, right. So we create with our words. And you just realized, I think, as you get older, just how important the word.
Well, like in the yoga system and in that philosophy, you would say that you're chanting it into existence. It's a
Yes.
chant. So the
Yes.
word is the word was made flesh and dwelt among us, if you want to be a Christian. But if you're a yogi, you just say, that this is a chant, and you're chanting. There's a goddess named Vach. It's VAC with a hook on the bottom, so it's like a CH. So Vach is the goddess of speech. And she's a goddess because she creates worlds with speech.
Including the gods.
Including the gods.
Okay. And then is it Nada Brahma, which is sound of God?
Yes. That's kind of emerges out of that, and Nada Brahma is
Very
later.
similar.
But Vach is in the Rig Veda. There are hymns to Vach in the Rig Veda, and that's very old, as old as stuff as we've got, really.
Yeah.
So we're spelling with words.
Yes.
I love to play with words, and we have an imagination, and if we break that down, you can be a nation unto yourself. Magi, nation.
Oh,
So
very nice.
we're casting spells every time we speak. So are we casting spells that are uplifting, or are we doing what we're seeing all around us, where spells are being cast through, media that are manipulating?
Mr. Guma used to say, some know it, some don't.
Yeah. So that, and then I would say the piece about kind of not fitting in, and then after a while, just not kind of caring what people, and not that I do care to a degree, but it's not like Rue, my late teacher, would call it dancing to the eyes of others. I don't dance to the eyes of others. No. But when you are comfortable in your own skin, shall we say, when people are calling names and terms, it doesn't mean anything anymore, because you're just like, take your best shot. Like and also you're making a damn fool out of yourself, because you obviously don't have the intellectual rigor to just whatever. So it's helped a great deal. And also, so I'm a natural researcher, and I never went to college. I went to art school, went to Parsons when I was like 29. I studied interior design. And so I did that in my early 30s. But yeah, I never went on to college, but I love to research. I love to learn. I just love it so much. And I don't read fiction. I like to read nonfiction, and go deep into a subject. And I've just done this my whole life. And then I experiment with it, if it's something that I can experiment with, and then I'll share it or teach it.
Beautiful.
Ever.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and libraries were just places of worship, and then you probably went to the one in Manhattan, the main library in Manhattan, which is a temple.
Oh, it is a temple.
My God. I was like slack-jawed when I walked in there the first time. Well, the only time.
Right?
Yeah.
Good Lord.
It is a temple. Oh my God.
Beauty. We're just awestruck when you walk in the front door.
And what's that saying? Why would they do that with a library? They're telling us, these places of learning will.
And the architecture is another aspect of it.
Yes.
Which is uplifting. So that's a whole other topic that we could go sideways on.
Yeah.
But let's keep going on our trajectory. So, all right. So we already talked about that. And then,
so you're done grown up.
Done grown up. Okay. And then,
then you did some traveling.
I
with
did.
Mr. Silva.
Okay. Well, that was a little later. I'll just quickly say I lived in my 20s. And so that was a lot of fun. Waited tables and went to auditions and was a dancer and an actress. And So that was
For
an ex-
dance, and you auditioned for,
I wanted to be a ballerina
oh,
more than anything in the world, but I don't have, and I was told this by an instructor, I do not have a Balanchine body. I have more of like a Twyla Tharp. She worked with more sort of muscular dancers, and they didn't have to be, like
pencil
Balanchine.
thin,
Yeah.
pizzazz.
So yeah, and then I danced jazz, which I absolutely loved. And so yeah, I had a scholarship at Step Studio, and then I would dance at Alvin Ailey, just take their courses. I wasn't dancing for the company or anything like that. And so anyway, I did that through my 20s, and then met the man who became the father of my girls. And so yeah, so my 30s, I went to Parsons when I was 29, and I did interior design, that kind of thing. And so then, it did kind of life, and then life did what life often does, and I received what I call the midlife face slap when that marriage fell apart. And by then we were in Seattle, we'd left New York, and I never thought in my wildest dreams I would be a single mother of 2 daughters. And that was, of course, the essential wake up, the crisis, right? And as a very wise friend of mine once said to me, "Do you see the Isis in crisis, Shonagh?"
I wonder who that was.
So I'll add in, your book, Love and Spirit Wisdom, chronicles this, right?
Yes, Love and Spirit Medicine.
Love
Yeah.
and Spirit Medicine, sorry, yes.
Yeah, which you guys also.
So we've taken over the publishing of that book, and all these links will be around, but it's on the Logosophia website where you can pick up Shonagh's books.
Yeah. And that's essential. It was a dark night of the soul. And we need a dark night of the soul, many of us, because Brew, my late teacher, who I discovered after this crisis, but he also used to say, crisis awakens. It awakens. And he would say the dark well serves. Of course, he would say that's where the resources are. And
Right.
now, these poor souls who are suffering, they're just, these shrinks, just give them pills.
Oh, that's criminal.
And
It's criminal.
it is criminal.
It's
And
criminal.
I'll tell you, every single client I've worked with my retreats that I've been doing for 9 years, almost 9 years, has rued the day, just regretted ever going on those damn things. Because it's not like you're just like, you know what, I'm done, and you can go off them.
No.
No,
But in any
that's by
case,
design.
yes, of course, it's by design. And also, as well, these seer poets of old Ireland, who I quite admire, back then, they weren't afraid of depression and yearning. And now, granted, these people were training in, to be the poets of their for their tribes. So different story. But they wanted to go in darkness in their training, because they would stew on those emotions, and through that emotion they would create this absolute work of art in the form of a poem, in the same way that a painter does or a writer will, right? Like they're just feeling tremendous emotion. And you have that, I talked about it in the book, from that book Drunk the Night Before, I forget the author's name, but talking about how the drunken artist or the drug addicted artist, as this
Tortured artist.
but yeah.
And
But
isn't that the Cauldron?
yes, exactly.
We work with just to cut in just for a second, sorry.
Yeah.
We work with someone named Peter Kingsley, and he was someone who also worked through that depression. Depression is not yours, and he would even have visions of the goddess being completely tortured and wrecked, and and he would say, things like, I need to do something, whatever I can do to help her. But the point is that it's just like, it's the zeitgeist that you're plugging into. Sometimes when you're depressed, it's not you're just feeling the whole thing, and and it's very sacred. And it is a way to clarity and understanding and wisdom, because you have to go through that. And that's what, that's what the dark night of the soul is.
And his book, In the Dark Places of Wisdom,
Mhm.
it addresses that.
Yes. And so we have a predatory medical industry that has co-opted the dark night of the soul, essentially, and said, oh, come here, we'll give you these, or you need this operation,
Yeah.
which is another subject we won't touch, but you know what I'm
Mm.
speaking to, you know, instead of saying, all right, boy, it's a mess in there. Let's help you through this, you know,
It's
really.
there for a reason, and it's a
Yeah.
catalyst.
Yeah. So that happened. My marriage fell apart. And that was the crisis that awoke, you know, and then I started meditating. And also, I'd never meditated before. When I did, this voice came into my head, just pierced through. It was, I don't know how else to describe it. And it said to me, there's only love. And it's one thing to share that. It's quite another, like, I mean, I was not scared, but like, wait, that was not my thought. It pierced through. And I felt tremendous emotion. It was very, very, that was a powerful piece
I
for
would
me.
imagine so.
And I was digging deep. And
It
also,
was
you
like
know, you're
truth
humble.
itself was coming
Yes.
and
And when you're in
articulating.
crisis, you're humbled.
Yeah.
And that's kind of when spirit can reach you also.
Mm.
And so, and then I met my next husband, who's a gem, and we're divorced now, we're good friends, but he introduced me to Brew Joy, and Brew was my first teacher and really my main teacher for this lifetime. And he was
And what is the lineage? What, in what?
with Brew,
Yeah.
he was a Johns Hopkins trained MD of all things. And he was looking at a very illustrious career. He was absolutely brilliant. And at the same time, though, he was working with this woman named Eunice. And this was in California. I think she was somewhere in LA. And she was a seer. And there was just something in him. He was learning from her. And he himself was very psychic, very, very highly sensitive. And so one day, Brew was at the hospital and he was doing the rounds. And this voice came into his head and said, your career as a medical doctor is over.
It's done. Really.
Yeah.
By
Pack.
the way, and there's no argument.
So
Yeah.
your voices.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so he did. And then he proceeded to travel around the world to different teachers. And the first place he went was Findhorn, of all places.
Oh, sure. Mhm.
And
Interesting place back in the day. I think it's
yes,
still there.
Brew tells a great story. Okay, so he talked about how sort of the first kind of 30 years of this teaching, he was in this kind of Christ-like kind of consciousness. And he wrote a beautiful book called Joy's Way. And there are different techniques in there for working with energy and this kind of thing. And then at some point, the deep psyche, which demands balance, as he would say, up came the shadow.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
he ended up writing this book called Avalanche: Heretical Reflections on the Dark and the Light. And I absolutely love that
Oh
book.
my, what a
Wrote that in
title.
1996 or something. And he starts the book out with two dreams. And the first dream he had as a boy. And he had this very lucid dream where he's outside of his house and Jesus comes to him. And he's just overwhelmed. And he's just like, oh my God, this man. And he runs in the house to tell his family he's going to follow Jesus. And no one gives a damn. And so he realized in that moment, like, I'm kind of on my own with
Huh.
this.
Isn't that
And
interesting?
so, yeah. And then later in his life, he had a dream where it's nighttime. He's driving this white car. And even that is everything. Brew, by the way, was a master at working with dreams and he really understood the shadow.
Mm.
He delved into a lot of Jung. So you could say maybe he was Jungian, yes, but he also was himself quite a master of this understanding. But anyway, that white car, the car's how you navigate through life. And that was his innocence, right? And he comes to this gas station and he sees these Hell's Angels over on the side and he sort of looks at them. And then he sees this older man and figures, okay, I think I'm all right. So he goes to talk to the older man to gas up his car and he senses this evil presence. And he just knows he's got to get the hell out of there. And so he goes to his car, he gets inside, he rolls up the window and just like gets a seatbelt on. He's going to leave. He looks in the rear view mirror, and evil incarnate is sitting in the back.
Oh, really? In the back seat.
He just locked himself in the car with the
And he
was
woke
the
up
old
screaming.
man where the
No,
evil
it wasn't the old man.
This was separate.
Yeah, this was separate. This was Satan in the back
Oh
of the
my
And
goodness.
so he said he woke up screaming, and he could not talk about that dream for a number of years. And he said there is a part of his psyche that will be forever traumatized from that. But we all want to cast that kind of thing out. And what Brew did, of course, moving forward, and this was what made him such an incredible teacher, was you have to redeem that. And I'm not saying like we're going to redeem Yuval Harari or whatever is evil, but I'm not talking about that. But just to understand that by virtue of being people, human beings, we have all of that in us
We
within.
have to reconcile with that. Yes.
Yeah, and the deep. So we've got our surface consciousness, which we're in, all of us right now. But then there's that deep psyche, and that's impersonal, and it's collected to what Jung would call the collective unconscious. And you could also think of that collective unconscious as the other world,
Sure.
where it's all there. And yeah.
But that's what Gurman used to say, that anyone in this room, anyone's capable of the most heinous act.
Yes, Bree used to tell us that. It's like,
don't be sitting there like you're special.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. So anyone who really knows.
Oh, you're chosen.
You're chosen.
Right.
You might be chosen, but that's still there.
Yeah.
You have to face that shadow. You have to face that dark part. And that's why it makes me crazy with the Hallmark kind of love and light stuff, drives me up a wall.
Well, Brew would say they're in preference. And so at some point in your maturity, hopefully, you don't get to be in preference anymore. You've got to see the beautiful
and face it. You have to face it. You have to look it in the eye.
Yes. And what Brew would say, okay, so he helped me with my bullying and also just not fitting in and all of this stuff. I was like 41 when I started working with him. First of all, he would say to me, you didn't come here to fit in with everybody. You live the pattern that you came in to live. Own it. Just be it. And then in terms of the bullying, he was like, he would ask this question, what was right about that? How did it serve? So Brew would say that, look, the victim piece, that's a very important staging. And then you move on in your life, you continue. And at some point, maybe you get to a point where you can look at it from this broader understanding of like, all right, that happened. And to the surface consciousness, absolutely. And okay, that was my wounding. There are other people, obviously.
Absolutely right. Just think,
but in any case, how did it serve? It's a completely different mindset where you start to realize, things happen for a reason. And how did it serve? And how did I grow as a result? These woundings, Brew used to say, there's no manual that says childhood should be absolutely perfect. Absolutely not. These woundings occur in childhood at different times, and they set the course of the patterning that we came here to live. And some people make that descent and they never get out, and other people, it sends us on these paths. And this is not a perfect world. It's not supposed to be. It's not meant to be. And, from a Christian perspective, it's run by, but I understand this from law, because I used to, the Bible, I was like, oh God, no. But then my law teacher was like, Shonagh, if you want to learn anything about law, you better let go of that bias, because
you need to.
That book, they're talking about law in that book, so that I was like, oh, from that perspective. So this world is quote unquote Satan's world. It's all metaphor. It's not a dude with horns but Satan rules the dead. And so in our legal system, it's it's all fictional. And all these in the legal system, we have statutes, not laws. Law is succinct, it's easy to understand. there's just a few of them. We're like, yeah, okay, I'm on board. Yeah, don't steal, don't kill. What? Okay, got you. I can do that. But then statutes, we have like over 60 million of them. Those are man's laws. And then there's sort of God's laws or nature's laws, whatever, right? And every culture had their sort of maxims, there were the Brehon laws in Ireland and so it's sort of how society is formed. But then you can get into a tyranny, which is what we're in.
We are.
With 60 million, over 60 million statutes. Are you kidding me? That you're
Is
breaking.
Hmm? Is that just in the United States, in America, or is that
No, that's
global?
all over the place. Yeah. So anyway, I don't remember where this happens all the time. I like weave and
But it's all it's all good. It's wonderful. Because it's just pulling out of you, and we didn't know if you even wanted to talk about law, but it's great because it's up right now.
It's up also as a self-learner. The whole reason why I started law, and I haven't even talked about the mushroom yet, but
Right.
what happened was, okay, I started working with Brew, and I was married to this really great guy, and he just made it possible for me to train with these teachers so that I could work with Brew. And I had my beautiful daughters, and when my daughters were with their father, if there was a workshop or whatever, I would go to that. And so I made a real deep study, and I worked with really just a small handful of teachers, superb. Interestingly, mostly men. It was Brew. Anyway, Brew is my main teacher. And then at 48, I was hearing about ayahuasca. And so I tried that, and I tried it a couple of times, but something said to me, this is not your medicine. And so then the mushroom was calling, and I knew I had a good friend who, had a lot of experience with that, and also lived up in the Washington rainforest area, and said, you got to come out here. I'll kind of initiate you. And so, and before that also, I don't drink alcohol. I don't do drugs. I had my bout with alcohol and cocaine when I was like 19. I was like, all right, we're done. In that Dionysian temple, I live to tell the tale. We're done. But anyway, so
cocaine is the most overrated drug of them all.
Oh God. Anyway, horrendous. But yeah, but so with the mushroom, this person was wonderful. He's still a very dear friend. And I had the experience outside in a moss forest, with a waterfall nearby. I mean, it was
how lovely.
Beautiful around midnight. It was incredible. And it blew my mind, absolutely blew my mind. But also because I had these good teachers really help, and especially Brew with all the shadow work. So because some people really, you come out of there thinking you're Jesus Christ or whatever, like you can get very, identified. And
the spiritual ego is the hardest of all the egos to crack. You have an experience and you identify with it, like you said. It's really a hard one for a lot of people.
I'll tell you a quick little story. Before I found my way to the mushroom, before I did the ayahuasca, my friend and I at the time, my girlfriend, we wanted to try this ayahuasca. And so this other woman I knew said, oh, why don't you come to this party, in downtown Seattle? And it's all ayahuasca people, and you can meet some people and whatever. And so we go, and my friend and I'm very irreverent. Anyway, we show up, and it was just like you say, like it was, people are like, oh, are you doing the dieta? How long you've been doing the dieta for, and how many times have you worked with with the grandmother or whatever? Anyway, there was just a vibe there, and it was not the most comfortable vibe. And then a couple of people were like, oh, you need to talk to, Adam, whatever his name was, some guy who, I don't know, puts on these circles or whatever. And I look over at that dude, and he's got like 4 smoking hot hippie chicks around him. And I was like, okay. Going on over here. I'm not really feeling it. And so my friend and I left. And when we left that house, I said to her, there wasn't a funny bone to be found in that place. Like you
Oh.
just,
Oh, that's a tell.
yeah. I was just like, nah, these are not my people. But anyway, and that's not to say everyone, because there's awesome people who do that. But I'm just saying that was our initial experience. Anyway, so then with a mushroom, that first experience out there in the rainforest, I just had a very profound experience. I didn't know what to expect, and it just blew my heart open. It was incredible. And I said, this is a portal. So if anyone asked me, what is a magic mushroom, psychedelic mushrooms, I'd say it's a portal, because it is. It's nature's one of many natural portals. And Brew would say also, it opens you to the deep psyche and the collective unconscious. So, if people ask, sometimes they're like, well, do you think those voices are you, or are they the fairy, the she? And it's like, well, we're portals. The mind is a portal. And what the mushroom does is it connects these otherwise dormant parts of the mind with the conscious mind. Right. And so it opens you up. Brew would say it's there all along. And everyone is unique. So they're going to have different reference points. And I hear this with near-death experiences as well. Someone explained that it depends on what of your belief systems, and then spirit will come in as whatever you're going to respond to, be it.
Do you agree that the experience, the entheogenic experience, is in the experience itself, the inside and the outside no longer makes sense in the way, in our regular life, where we see things outside and we think I have this interior thing going on. But, the mushrooms break that. And that's because there is a unity to everything. And if there wasn't, this couldn't happen. So that, that's why the question is doesn't make sense in terms of the experience itself, right? I mean, it sounds like you're having a voice. Is it from within, without? It doesn't really apply.
No, you feel that interconnectedness. And the fact is, we can speak to nature. Everything has, just as my spirit is inhabiting this body vessel, there's spirit in the trees, which has long been understood. People would seek advice from the trees, but there's spirit, it's everywhere. And so you're in this open state where you have access to that. And as well, and this happened for me, especially my first year, the mushroom will take you into your unhealed stuff, or things that you don't necessarily want to look at. I always joke that if I had $1 for every tear I cried on the mushroom, I could have paid cash for my house in Vermont. But I've since sold. But that's necessary. I really do see that this is a temple. This is a holy temple, and we're very lucky because there's a lot of spirits that would like one of these, and we got one for a life. And
thus possession.
Yeah. And Steiner, I was talking in a recent conversation about his book, How to Know Higher Worlds. And one of the kind of not prerequisites, but sort of preparatory piece for coming into this is he would say you have to take care of your physical body.
Yes.
It's really.
Yes, even in the yoga tradition, it's the same thing. It's imperative.
Yeah. And it's also like an honoring of
there was one of the practices from that book, as I recall, which a long time ago I read, it was something along the lines of expect something completely surprising to happen every day.
As a practice.
Yeah, as a practice. And he had another practice which was very much based on the ancient Pythagorean practices of going back and reliving the previous day, though the Pythagoreans did in the morning and he would have you do it at night. I can't remember which was which, but you would just go and remember as far back as you can, just the events of the previous day, you know, whatever, start and just keep
But
on going
starting
back.
from where you are now and back up,
And if
back
you-
up, back up,
And if
back
you
up.
could, then go back to the day before that, right? And supposedly for him, that had to do with recalling past lives or a way to
And was it
access.
also a Rosicrucian
lives.
practice? Because I remember Robert.
Well, that's how it
Gilbert.
was explained, yes,
Yeah.
but the Pythagoreans did it. They were reported to have done that
Mhm.
before that. So I always
Mhm.
found that really interesting and have done it, I still don't remember any past lives, but I remember what I had for breakfast, so I guess that's okay.
It's a
I never
story.
got that far. It always was, if I couldn't sleep, that was the best thing to
Yeah.
put me to sleep. It
Yeah,
would
oh
just
yeah, of
like,
course.
It's like,
it would relax my mind so much. I would
Yeah.
just like drift off, like gone.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
And also you have a YouTube channel, Mushrooms, the Mushrooms Apprentice?
yeah,
Or
so I
Mushrooms, is it
started
the?
a little podcast. I had a blog, a newsletter that I did for years, many years.
mhm.
And then I stopped that in mid 2020. And I took myself off all social media in mid 2020. And just kind of laid low and did retreats. So I've been hosting, for people who don't know, I host individual retreats in my home. And my client arrives on Sunday, they leave Friday morning, and it's deep, deep psychospiritual work. And it's all about that one person. I'm not into groups.
And
I
are you still doing that? Are you still accepting
Yeah,
clients?
yes, but I'm not doing it at the frequency that I was for a few years. I had a couple of years where I did.
So if
like,
someone were interested, you have a website or a
yes,
contact?
yes. So my website is shonaghhome.com, and so they'll see retreats, and also I do sessions, and I do counseling sessions all the time, and it's
On phone or Zoom or?
through Zoom, through
Mm.
Zoom, and I also work with cards. I've been working with cards for quite some time.
Okay.
But I started recently incorporating that into my regular sessions with people. So it's,
Nice,
Oh, good.
very nice.
yeah.
Well, good. And all that'll be in the show notes.
Yeah. But my podcast, so let's see, 2022, I sold my house in Vermont and I moved to Virginia, where I am now, which I love. And I thought, I'm going to start a podcast. So it's sort of like doing a newsletter, but I get to interview people who I adore, like you guys are on the
Mhm.
podcast. And so, yeah, so that's the mushroomsapprentice.com, but it's not obviously strictly mushrooms because I have other
Right.
interests. So it's kind of like what I've been just focused on over the past 12 years, almost 13 years now, of apprenticing myself to the mushrooms. Because when I had that first mushroom experience, I realized this is a portal. This is
Mhm.
ancient. These are teachers. I want to know more. I want to go back in. And I ended up having 12 months in a row of these monthly mushroom explorations. And my joke at the time was there aren't too many middle-aged ladies in the suburbs going into the forest and eating 5 dried grams of mushrooms, but that was me.
So you
And
mean on a schedule of once a month?
I didn't plan to,
But
but that's
that's how it ended up?
which I also, again, I'm just like, I just wonder if there's anything to this reincarnation. I mean, I think I was maybe one of those poets back in the day, perhaps.
Mhm.
So their training was 12 year. And again, like things that I
Oh,
didn't know
right,
until
right.
doing some research for my
Mm.
books. I had those 12 months in a row. And now it's been 12 years of apprenticeship. So I said, I want to go back and I want to learn. And every time I would go in, I still do this, humble, open heart, seeking wisdom. That's what I'm seeking. I don't worry about, you know,
Yeah.
kind of a game plan or whatever, because the mushroom sweeps you away. So I'm just like, all right, just teach me and help me to be a better person, and what do I need to learn? And so that mushroom has changed my life, and it's brought people like you, like the most extraordinary people to me. It's just been incredible. And at
Mm.
the same time, I don't you can't romanticize it in that it's not for everyone, and it can be absolutely harrowing, can really mess certain people up. There are certain people who just should never do it.
That's why there are different paths for everyone
right.
and different religions for everyone. And,
That's
you
right.
know, when we were, you'll know this from your Catholic training, that the Catholic Church is the one true religion. What nonsense, what utter nonsense. So, no, everyone's different and
Mhm.
everyone accesses information in a different way.
That's right. That's right. And even no two mushroom journeys are alike because, you know, it's going into this unique ecosystem here.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, we're all made different. I remember one time we had a women's group at the ashram, and I made some kind of a statement like, oh, like we're all alike, we're all the same. And Gurma was like, no, you are not. No, you are not. Everyone is different and unique. We're not all the same.
correct.
And it was just like in a split second, it opened my eyes to a whole different perspective of how
Yeah.
things truly are. But
There's
we have been fed this mantra of, oh, we're all the same, we're all equal. No, we're not all equal.
no, we're not. Nature's
We're
not.
No,
Nature's not.
we're all
There's a-
endowed with different properties and gifts and
Balance, but not
and
equal.
depletions. Not everyone's the same.
Yeah, but that also shows you the genius of the creative capital C. That's genius that you can have that many just different forms. It's extraordinary. And there's an axiom that says what is like is not the same, or nothing similar is the same. So we can be
Similar is very different from the
Mhm.
same.
exactly, yeah.
There are some points. You
As
wanna
Lewis
say that?
Black would say, we're all snowflakes.
We're all snowflakes. You know Lewis Black, the comedian? Do you know
Who?
him? Lewis Black, the
The
comedian, is a New York
No.
Jewish comedian. He's brutal. And we just love him. We haven't heard him in years and
No,
years and
he's-
years,
he's
but he's
probably on-
brutally funny to us as
Well-
New Yorkers. Brutally.
As New
back in the
Yorkers,
day.
yeah.
Yeah.
He'd be
Comedy
canceled.
is kind of gone out with the last few years.
You know.
Yeah, that's what I said. He'd be canceled today. So
Oh, for
Yeah.
sure.
yeah,
Sure.
it's a shame because I love irreverence and I
And
love
that's him.
poking fun at sort of sacred cows, if
Yeah.
you will. Like just
No, what's more fun than that?
yeah, yeah.
You know,
It's
pop their balloon.
No, but that gets back to what you were talking about earlier with this whole, this victimhood is an addiction. And
There's such a good payback.
and you can't do comedy. People, storm out. Everybody's just screaming at each other online. We don't do any social media, but we've heard, that it's that
Word gets out.
It's just not a place for conversation. And it's designed that way, of course. It's again back to the emotional stuff, keep people stuck in their emotions, stuck in anger. Going back to the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna asked Krishna, well, what is it that keeps me from this wisdom? And he said, anger, fear.
Desire it is.
Desire, anger, and fear is what keeps you from it. Keeps you from understanding the true reality.
And it's the dwelling is the problem. Can we hear a little bit now? Can
Yeah,
we
so
shift
do you
a
wanna-
wee bit to
just,
the
let's-
poetic side
Well,
of
why don't
life?
you read a poem and then we'll talk about the poetry.
sure. I'll
Does that sound
quickly
good?
say that what happened in these mushroom journeys over those first 12 months was, first of all, there's a lot of my healing stuff that had to be addressed, but spirits were coming into me, and then making, and then animals, birds, owls, that kind of thing. And then at the end of the year, I went in June. It was the Venus transit, and these beings that I call star beings, because that's what they felt, celestial in nature, came in, and I call them the raucous ones. And I was with a dear friend of mine, and they spoke through me for 2-3 hours, and I didn't have a recorder because I didn't know I could do that. And it was incredible. Just it was I was incredulous when I was out of that. Incredulous. And so I started channeling.
So
and
they were speaking through
They
you,
were
so
speak-
you were
oh,
giving voice to their
Yes. And so when I go in, my hands go into spontaneous mudras, and then they
Oh.
explain later to me that it's like the conscious mind I have no idea what the hell's going on, but the body does. The body knows. And so it just naturally knows what the mudra is to hold that
Hmm.
particular electrical charge, because they explained to me that we are mostly water and spirit is electric. And so water holds a charge. And we are the vessel for our, or this is the vessel for our spirit to be in. It's this beautiful merging of, earth and spirit and soul. And so when I would channel, I would have to drink a lot of water, or else I would fry my circuits, because often numerous ones would come in. And after a couple of years, poetry started coming forth. And then I talk about this in the book, how then I was running at the time, and I would go run, I would do these forest runs in the early morning, and you're in this, it just puts you in this sort of mild trance state when you're running, get that running high. And messages would come in. And so that was great. I mean, it was like the spirits of the forest were speaking, and it
Right,
was poetic and in perfect rhyme.
so these are different from this initial star being.
Oh yeah,
contact.
very
So-
yeah. They
so
didn't speak
then,
poetic.
so then it shifted, and that opened you up to whatever, what we'll call nature spirits,
Yeah,
chi.
yeah,
So
yeah.
that's what, and they started speaking to you through actual poetry.
Yes. And then when you were asking about traveling, I was 52, I think, and I went to Scotland with Freddie Silva. And this trip came through my email, and at the time I had no dough.
And can you say a little bit who Freddie Silva is for people
Okay,
who
yes,
may not know
Freddie
the name?
Silva. He is an author, researcher. He's one of the world's leading researchers on these sort of sacred sites, crop circles. He wrote a book on crop circles called Secrets in the Fields. I mean, he's written a number of published books, and he's a public speaker, and he does these little boutique tours to certain areas. And so this one was to the Outer Hebrides of Scotland, which I'd never been to. And he's also a photographer, and he takes the most
Oh, is he?
beautiful, gorgeous photographs. And so I don't think I even read through the text other than the dates. I saw the price. The photographs were of the stone circles and the Scottish landscape, and every hair on my body stood on end. And I drove to the bank that day, and it was $500 non-refundable deposit. I had no idea how I was going to pay for the rest of it, but I took it out of the bank, got like a bank check. I didn't
You
want
made
it
a
to
commitment.
sent that off to Freddie, because he only took 6 people. That was the other draw. It wasn't like
Oh,
25 people.
interesting.
Freddie and 6 people. So, and I knew this was a pilgrimage, and I had, I don't know, 8 or 9 months or something to come up with the money. And then by then I had spoken at a few mushroom conferences, psychedelic conferences, and did some podcasts. So different people would contact me and listen to whatever I had to say. And so there was a wonderful guy in Scotland who lived there with his wife, and he contacted me, and we were sort of emailing back and forth. And then he said, yeah, I live in Edinburgh. And I was like, wait a minute, I'm flying to Scotland. And so I ended up flying to Edinburgh and staying overnight with him and his wife. And that was wonderful. I think I stayed there for a couple of days, and then went down to Inverness and rented a car, put on my big girl panties, because you are driving on the other side of the road.
Right.
Mhm.
And I drove to the Isle of Skye, which is the most beautiful place I've ever been in my entire life. So I had this gorgeous experiences there, and then dropped the car off, took the train up to Glasgow, and then stayed in a hotel. And the next morning met with Freddie and these 5 other very intrepid souls. 3 of them were these amazing women who I became friends with afterwards. But in any case, so we flew to the Isle of Lewis, and that's where Callanish Stone Circle is.
Mhm.
But there are these smaller stone circles. And so Freddie took us to those first. And so we go to this stone circle, and I kind of walked around the circle, and I felt some of the stones. And then I stood in the center of that circle, because Freddie explained these were placed on what he called geomagnetic hotspots. That, there's lines of magnetic energy along the earth, and these were specifically placed, and the geometry is very precise. They're mathematically precise structures. The stone is paramagnetic, so it will draw energy down to it. So you're in an electrical field, a charged field. I thought, all right, I'm going to stand in the center of this and just see what comes. And again, because I'm clairsentient and I'm not what is the clair where you see, clairvoyant? But I felt, and it was a tall male being on my left, and he put out his hand to me, and he had a golden orb in his hand, and I knew these are my people. And so, yeah, I reached out and I took it and I placed it in my heart center. And as soon as I did, I don't know why I'm losing my voice. I felt like I had a device in there. Like it felt, my God, I was like, okay. But I trusted this. And then we ended up at Kalanesh. And of course we had all this time to spend at that circle. And at one point I went up to one of the big stones, and I was just kind of pressing my body in and just kind of feeling the stone, the energy there. And by the way, I will say for anyone who asks, no, at that point, I had never watched whatever that show was. I don't even know the name of it.
Oh, that stupid show. I
Yeah,
know.
I was about to say that stupid show as well.
We watched it, we couldn't
Like,
watch anymore. It was just.
yeah, no. She falls into the stone and then she goes back in
Right.
time. I never read the books. I didn't watch that
know.
show. I don't watch TV. I don't even own one.
Someone's gonna know the title, but
Yeah. But
I
anyway,
can't remember.
so what happened though was I had brought my digital recorder, thank God, because I thought, if anything, if it comes up or whatever, I want to speak it into my recorder so I remember. Well, poetry came up, and I kind of spoke back and forth to this stone, and it came out in poetry. And then everywhere we went with Freddie, poetry was coming through. And later on that trip at another area of stones, they said to me, think of that orb as a cauldron and work with the metaphor of the cauldron. And so that's another thing, because then all these years later, I'm looking into the training of the seer poets. And in their training, it was understood that there are 3 cauldrons in the body. So the first cauldron is down by the dantian area, 3 finger widths beneath the belly button. But you could also think of it as the pelvis is like a cauldron, and that's the cauldron of incubation or the cauldron of warming. And that represents for the poets those first few years of their training. And we all have that, and they're just, they're learning, they're creating foundation. And then the second cauldron, which is where this was, is the cauldron of warming. And that is where you take the emotions that you felt and you stew them into poetry. And so the first cauldron it's the way a cauldron looks. It's got the legs and it's upright. That's the cauldron of warming. And it's upright because, flowing into that cauldron is everything from the infinite that is feeding us, giving us life. This cauldron is on its side, and it's turned upward through, they would say, joy or sorrow. So, we are experiencing life, we're experiencing so much and feeling these different emotions and learning from it, hopefully, right? And that's giving us wisdom and a reference point, right? So slowly, hopefully, that cauldron turns upright. And then you have up here the cauldron of wisdom, and that is on its lips upside down. And most people, it doesn't turn up, but for others who are really seeking, right, and that they're seeking that wisdom, it was understood for the poets that through all of that training and seeking and opening and learning, and they're also experienced magical training, by the way, because they were masters at divination, psychometry, where they would use either the tips of the fingers, the whorls of the fingers, or their staff. They could touch something with it and get a full download of information. So, their training was extraordinary. And this was pre-Norman Ireland, old.
Right. And what do you say? It's 20 years or something? 19?
Well, 20 years for the Druids, 12 years for and they were called the fili, the seer poets.
And that's spelled
FILIDH is fila for plural, and then FILI for individual fila. And so if after all that time, that the idea was to get that cauldron to turn upright, that cauldron of wisdom, and then you become like an Amergin or a Taliesin, who are famous magical poets.
So then
And
it's like a fountain that flows outward and.
yes, and you would be accomplished at whatever the art is. That represented all the arts.
Oh, it's exquisite.
Exquisite. And they were
Painfully exquisite.
I know we don't have anything like that today. And so these people, and there was men and women, but unfortunately the women you don't really hear of any, they've been kind of ignored, just as the women shamans have. There's a fantastic book by Barbara Tedlock called The Woman in the Shaman's Body. And it's all about that, these magical, amazing women, but the anthropologists and whatnot. And this is as recent as, the 90s.
It's like there's a book, a Tibetan book, Women of Wisdom, that just each chapter is a different woman, a Tibetan woman or nun who had accomplishment in spiritual. But same thing in Buddhism. They don't really give quarter to the women mystics for whatever reasons.
For whatever reason, yeah.
Well, we were lucky enough to have a woman yogini teach us, a woman from Calcutta.
Yeah, our teacher was.
So that supposedly, it's whatever, thrice blessed to have a woman and a mother teach you in the yoga tradition.
Yeah.
And she always said that the women didn't really need the training. Whatever that meant. But we were still there for 10 years, but regardless, she just said, no, the women just get it. They just get it naturally.
Well, these seer poets back in the day, their rank was so high that they were above the law. And so they were on the same level as kings. And so they would show up to a king's home with their entourage, and you had to feed them and, take care of them and accommodate them for however long they stayed. And there were 3 types of poetry: black, white, and speckled. So because these poets, they had to, they learned the lineage of these important people within the Celtic framework. So they would know the family lineage, and they would do poems of praise for them, and of course for the king. And so that was white poetry of praise. And speckled poetry was poetry of warning. So if they realized they were not getting the kind of treatment that they should get, or the kind of, whatever the poet, then they'd warn whoever that king or person of rank was, like, you better watch yourself, because
it was embedded in the poetry, in other words.
Yeah, well, they would create a poem that was, had a warning in it, because coming after that would be black poetry, and that was satire.
Oh, really?
And so
People
these
wouldn't want to
people,
be
you want to
satirized.
talk about wordsmiths.
Yeah.
So they would compose, and so they also had the gift of extempore recitation, meaning they could recite without having to look at, the just right. So that depth of training, they would just eviscerate you with this just mocking, satirizing poems that no one would be able to look at that person without laughing. Like that person would just lose all credibility.
Right.
And now there were some poets that abused that.
Sure.
And they would come in and just demand all this stuff and stay forever with their entourage.
You can see that, sure.
Yeah. I mean, people are people. So just
part
because
of the human condition, is it not?
Yes, it is. It is. So anyway, whatever. All that to say, yeah. So this poetry is just continued, and every time I go in the mushroom, poetry comes through. That's how they speak. They speak in rhyme.
Yeah,
So the book is covered with it.
This this Iranian scholar, Sayed Hussein Nas, who's somebody we used to read a lot of, he said something along the lines as he thinks that was the original human language, was poetry, and it was just always spoken in poetry. And one of our authors, Alan Chadwick, biodynamic teacher, died in 1980. He said that growing up, now he was a blue blood, and then he became a Shakespearean actor and got excommunicated from his house. He gave up his heritage, gave up his
Inheritance.
inheritance to study Shakespearean acting. And but he said growing
It's
up
amazing.
in, with the tutors and all that, you weren't allowed to speak prose until afternoon. So in other words, you would always,
Oh, really?
you
I
would
don't
be
remember
speaking
that.
in poetry throughout the morning, no matter
Wow.
what you were saying.
And
Wow.
Martine Prechtel, in his books, he talks about that, so Martine.
Mhm.
And his books teach secrets of the talking jaguar and stealing Beneficio's roses,
And the piece
And
of,
long life, honey in the
long
heart.
life,
Yeah.
honey in the
Which was a
heart.
greeting.
It was what?
That was a greeting. Speaking of
Yes,
being
yes,
poetic, that's how people greeted each other.
yes.
yes,
But he studied with the Tutahil Indians, and he said everything, their language was poetry, the native indigenous people, and they spoke in poetry, and everything was beautiful. So like when you meet someone, you say, oh, your eyes is like the most beautiful stars fell from the sky, and then they turned into moons and they became your eyes, and it's so wonderful to see you, and you uplifted my life. That's hello.
and we'll take 2 empanadas, you know.
But then now, isn't it lamentable and just painful and grievesome to see what has happened to the English language? And we're reduced to LOL and WTF,
OMG.
OMG, and as you say, that linguistic eloquence has been butchered to the point that people cannot even express themselves or have a meaningful conversation, a meaningful debate without going to ad hominem, attacking the other person, without standing your ground with equilibrium and taking in someone else's perspective. I can't tell you how many times I've shifted what my belief was in something by allowing myself to look at someone else's perspective that I do not like. And I was like, well, I had to come to the realization on many things that I was wrong. I was ignorant on that fact. And in my ignorance, I was arrogant.
Mhm,
And I
mhm.
had to say that, I had to speak that out.
Yeah.
And then allow for some humility to creep its way in and say, okay, let me hear what you have to say. And maybe you got something that I don't know. Now, maybe you have a piece of information that was hidden from me, that what I thought was true was actually a lie. But
Mhm.
how would I know unless you were there to point it out to me?
Yes,
So
yes.
there's that.
And the problem now also is the algorithms. So people are interested in something and that's all they're
They're
fed.
fed.
Like if I go on YouTube and I don't know, looking up, I don't know, raising dogs or something, right? And then I'm just going to get videos on, kennels and this and that. Like it's crazy. Like it's actually really obnoxious.
Yeah, like I was listening to Richard Vobe's channel and he was talking about common law and taking your name back,
Right.
reclaiming your name and registering it as a limited liability corporation, as an LLC. In England, they just call it limited, LTD.
Yeah.
And so I did some research and I went online and I went to North Carolina, I guess it was, Secretary of State, to find out what are the documents that I need to register my name, Krys Crimi, as a business.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden, now in YouTube, I'm getting these little videos pop up.
Yeah.
On here, we can help you form an LLC. Do you need help in knowing that? But I mean, this is not news to anyone. Everybody knows this now.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is old news.
But what it does though is it just perpetuates that way of thinking, and it's not exposed to other
Right,
Yeah.
and there's a positive side to that too. For example, I love music and I'm interested in music and what have you. And I used to have a college radio show for a number of years. And what happens after a while, so this is another inversion and a distortion of a sacred principle. Whereas, after a while, I've been looking for music, going to this is even before websites, going to record stores, what have you. And then eventually the stuff starts coming to you. Right. And
In
this
the
is,
physical, you
and
mean,
this is,
not just on
yeah,
computers.
whatever, some in every single way, whether someone will just say, hey, I heard this great band, whatever, check them out.
Right, not just computer though.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it happens with books, with literature,
Mhm.
with all that
Right.
sort of stuff. Whereas if you put the effort into something, it'll come back to you, right? As there's a
frequency.
Commentary on one of, I think, the Yoga Sutras, where it says, as you move to the divine moves to you. All right. So, so there's a sacred part of that. There's a sacred principle, or as some people would say, it's an artifact of the construct.
Or it's a
But
law of
I don't like
attraction.
the word construct, but it isn't, it is a deception. That's for sure. But the structure of it is that, whereas it works both ways, instead of it just,
It works on all levels. It
Right.
works in the
So,
physical.
because everything that's not good, and we call it not good or evil in this world or whatever, that's detrimental to us coming to the knowledge that we should have, that's our birthright, is a mockery and a distortion on the methods that you do use to get there.
Mhm.
And it turns back on itself, and we end up, and then that takes us over, and we don't even realize what we're doing.
That's why to be constantly vigilant is the rule. You have to
Yes.
be constantly vigilant,
Mhm.
which is
Mhm.
also something that we like. Could
Yeah.
we have a poem?
Yes. Okay. Now we can shift gears to this. So I will explain this one. So let's see. This came in a couple of years ago, actually, on my morning walk. And you're out there. I walk along the base of the Shenandoah Mountains every morning. So beautiful. And I'm out there early. Like this morning I was out there at 6. And I like to be out there as it's getting light and the birds are singing. It's so beautiful. And there's a particular area of trees on either side of me. And I just love, it's almost like walking through a tunnel. And so this was a morning. And so every so often, just like those morning runs, something will come through. And so I was just thinking about whatever, World Economic Forum, like just everything, right? Just the shit show that is our planet today, and these absolutely debased excuses for humans who are just creating such horror. And so I just spoke in rhyme, and I just had my recorder, and I just went for it, and so I spoke in rhyme, and then I got an answer, and I said, "Spirits wise, I ask you, please, bring the dark ones to their knees. Wake the people from their slumber, or they will see they're just a number." And they said, "Full moon lights what has been hidden. From the shadows, what's forbidden now has voice through those devices. Note the core of that word, vices. This is yet another warning. Many of you will be mourning what's been lost to screen time's call. It encourages the fall of mind from sovereignty's embrace. Gone is wisdom without trace. An overlay of frequencies that ensure you won't be free. Yet like good midwife, nature waits. Align with her to mitigate the sticky web of intern net, whose spell causes you to forget where you come from, what gives you life. She cuts through deceit like a knife, as your ancestors once knew. you must follow nature's cue. Nature's systems don't abuse. In nature there's no evil ruse. Imperiled are they who ignore her signs. Those who do soon become blind, for false systems lead one astray, stealing cherished rights away. Nature's laws are easily learned. Long has man heeded the turn of starlit wheel that marks the times of darkness or of light sublime. The coming tide calls you away from those devices that hold sway. Instead, attention must be drawn toward taking you from lowly pawn to king or queen on chessboards faced. With that mindset, you will erase the sense of powerlessness you feel. The dark masters want you to kneel before their mighty creations. They want control of every nation. In you dwells the Holy Spirit. Be still and quiet, and you'll hear it. Inner voice speaks without sound, yet most ignore it. They are bound to wrong-held beliefs put in them by clever bards who spew their phlegm. Before this cycle of challenge ends, you'll witness many strong wills bend to march in lockstep with the rest. You've witnessed many fail the test. Only when one's will is strong can one resist urge to belong. Initiations are not easy. They will call you to the floor. It's when our hero's on his knees, he finds the secret hidden door that leads to inspiration's light, that offers ways to tame the night. An inborn navigation tool takes you beyond deception's rule. The hidden genius is now found, whose tools will help to break new ground. So,
Perfect.
thank you.
Yeah, and it covers a lot of the stuff we were talking about
Well,
too.
it starts in silence.
Mhm.
It is, and then it ends, returns back to silence.
Yes. Yes, yes. And we are just constantly bombarded with this just noise. And, watch me, listen to me, check this, clickbait, all this stuff coming at us. And this device it's a trance machine. It's really a trance. I mean, it's a
And a
scrying.
scrying.
Yeah, that came to me on a mushroom
Yeah.
mushroom journey in my first year. I was talking with my mushroom friend. I had the house to myself that night, and I was in my office, and I had this altar, and I have all these things come set up on my altar, and I just had a candle lit, and I had done just a teeny bit of mushroom, but in they came. And I never, ever put my cell phone to my ear. I always put it on speaker, and I just put it up against something. And of course, the screen goes black. So these beings are speaking through me to my friend, reading his mind. And then at some point, yeah, he can tell you that was a whole experience. Yeah. But then they said to me of the phone, that is a scrying machine. I was
Where
like,
did you get that?
Mhm.
oh my God, because of course people would scry on black obsidian. And for those who don't
Yes.
know what scrying is, you're looking into a polished surface and you sort of shift the mind so that you're seeing images, you're receiving messages from it. And that's what this thing is. And then I realized, my God, all of this is magic.
Yes. Yes.
It's black magic. I mean, it's wonderful we get to do this, but they're using it against us. And they've got us all very dependent on this. And they will be pulling the rug out at some point. They already are in little ways. But anyway, so yeah, so that is saying that, yeah, it's a seduction device. And, telling me, among others who, find that poem relevant, that you got to put that aside.
And I would add that the poetry actually cuts through the that state of somnambulism. It cuts.
Yes.
So it's, as we talked earlier, that it's actually those words and your cadence, the cadence that comes through is a spiritual carrier wave. It's a frequency. All of the speech is a frequency. Well, everything is a frequency, but that's more readily recognizable as a frequency, a sound frequency that has waves. And you can be carried with words on that
Yes.
wave. And that can reach into the depths of the person's conscious awareness so that it breaks the spell. It cuts through that membrane of that prison that has been built with frequency. But this is a different frequency that can cut through that and get into that conscious awareness and then break that spell so that you can stand strong against this storm that we're in.
Yes. There's a book called The Encyclopedia of Celtic Wisdom by Caitlin and John Matthews. And they were talking about the word enchantment. And just like imagination, that word has just been dismissed and belittled. But they were saying the role of the Celtic bards and poets was to enchant, to chant, like you're saying, into being the other world.
Right.
To chant the other world through into this world.
Right.
And take people into this very different place. It was a thing of beauty.
Yeah, it's
to
very,
do.
Yeah, the correlation with what you do with the Rigvedic seers is that same thing, because in Indian, it's called Indian philosophy, is in two broad categories. One is like the Rig Veda and the Upanishads, the older stuff, and that's called Shruti, which means heard. And then everything following that, the Bhagavad Gita and all the mythology, is called Smrti. The word mer is memory, is remembered, right? But the Shruti is the heard, and that vision is heard. It comes through. It's a oral, AURAL, tradition, which is, I think, well, here's a question I have for you, in regards to that. So do you feel through all of this, because your connection with with the she, so so how do you feel yourself within this whole bardic tradition? Do you see yourself, or you don't bother identify, you're just doing what you're doing?
I see myself I'm inspired by the fili and the bandri, which is a Celtic medicine woman, if you will, a seeress. I'm inspired by that. But I also, in terms of, the understanding the depth and the just exquisiteness of their training, I'm not a fili. I don't think there is a fili walking this earth at this time. I mean, I think there are obviously beautiful poets. I mean, obviously, just gorgeous people who are but just in terms of just when I think of the fili, I think of that level of training. I've not had that depth of training. But again, this is a different time, and I know that that's in me. So my mushroom medicine friend from way back, who's still my very dear friend, he said to me, Shonagh, this is in the blood. There's the blood mysteries, and our ancestors are in our blood. He said, you take that mushroom, it goes in, it can read your DNA, everything. He said, and it just, whatever, somewhere in your bloodline, there's you as a fili or a fili, whatever. It's a mystery, right? It's a mystery, for goodness sake. But so that said, the she, it's the Irish word for fairy. These are not Tinkerbells. They're tall, noble beings. And there's different races of them. I mean, she, there's the Tuatha Danann, who were part of the, sort of the mythical kind of first wave of inhabitants who showed up on Ireland, who purged the Firbolgs, and they were trained in high magic. And then the Milesians arrived, and there was a huge battle, and then the She went underground, and She literally means mound. They went beneath the mounds.
Oh, does it?
Water. All right. So, and there's different, some are friendly, some are not, some you stay away from. But in any case, these beings, I picked them up in Scotland at the Stone Circle, like they're still very much
They rode home
with me. Yeah. Yeah. And it feels almost like Steiner, I think, would call it like having a holy angel, if you will, like that piece he was talking about, poetry, that I quoted from him at the beginning of my book, about how, not poetry, he was talking about fairy tales, or like having a guardian angel that walks with you for your whole life, right?
Yes.
So they feel like guardians and guides, and I speak to them every night before I go to bed. I have a conversation, and every morning before I leave my bed when I first wake up.
Beautiful.
And then throughout the day, it's like I just live with them, among them, in them, through them. I pay attention to signs. I have conversations at times with them. And this is not in poetry, and just like whatever. It's so natural, like it's just becomes just a natural part of me. And I do not take the poetry for granted, ever. Ever, because I always first of all, when it comes through, I'm always like, oh my God, like that's beautiful.
It is beautiful.
I don't write like that. I don't. You should. I'm like a shitty poet. Like if you saw, like, well, whatever. I think we've talked about that before. But they also have such a wonderful sense of humor, and just when it comes in, it's just so beautiful. So I don't know. I want to be in this state of I am in the state of tremendous gratitude. And then also it's sort of, so what do I do with this? And they've said, you're to share this. Bring it. And I know this just because I've had so many people sitting at my kitchen table at a retreat where I would share some of the poetry, and they're like deeply affected by it.
Yes.
Yes. And we've had people that we've sold the book to report that. And it's it must be deeply gratifying for you, really, and certainly, a great signal that you're doing the right thing.
Well, I experienced it when I was reading just the manuscript and doing the editing. And, I've got similar background with the Irish Catholic and from Belfast, and also on the other side with the Polish. The Polish also are very tied to the land. So on my father's side. But reading the poetry, it really felt as though something was awakening inside, there was an interior movement sparked by the poetry. And it's real. It's something that it brings up a longing for what's been lost or ripped away from us as humans.
Yes.
And every nationality, every country, every land has that in their traditions, in their ancient history. Everyone has it. It's a human thing, and its expression is different. So it comes out in this beautiful poetry from the fili, but it also comes out right now. And the authenticity of it is authenticated by its effect on the reader or the listener. And if it hits its mark, it opens you up to vulnerability and strength, which are pretty much the same thing. And that's what I really believe, that's what comes through in this poetry in your book, that the fili are alive. The fili want to be heard. Their voice needs to be expressed. And it will always find an outlet. There will always be a Shonagh Home. There will always be someone. There will always be, well, the fili, I guess, are not the she. So the fili are the poets.
But they were bringing through that poetic inspiration,
Yeah.
that it was called imbas. And
Imbas.
and their muse was Bridget, the goddess
Bridget?
Bridget.
Right,
Yeah, and
right.
she's daughter of the Dagda, and that's the Tua de Dona.
Oh, the
She's
two
one
de
of the
Dona.
she. And so they would think of themselves as being pregnant with a poem.
Hmm.
They would birth it through Bridget's grace.
Would you speak a little bit, it's in the book, about the process that the fili go through in their training with what's called incubation, which is also a practice that is very ancient and was in the, certainly in Turkey and Greece and those ancient cultures practiced incubation. Would you speak a little bit about that?
Yes, absolutely. So their training would begin at Samhain, so around Halloween. So the days were shorter, the nights were longer. And so it would start just before daybreak, and they would meet their instructor and they'd be given the lesson, whatever, and then they would retreat into these houses of darkness. They were windowless houses. And so they would be in, and they wanted to be in the darkness. That's where you, and in silence, no one was playing harps for them or anything. They had no soundtrack.
Mhm.
It was in that silent darkness where, your emotions would come up, whatever it was, and they would stew in that dark cauldron. And then they would come out in the evening, in darkness, and then give their poem.
And
And
how long would that
so that would go through over
process?
the winter till March, when
Oh,
first cuckoo bird called.
no.
And when they heard that, now these were the 17th century poets, and before that they trained in this way, and the pre-Norman did as well. They trained in darkness, and it was called incubation. But we have Martin who wrote about these young men in Scotland and how they trained.
Martin, is that,
I think it's Martin.
is that the name? Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. And
you
so
reference him in the book, yeah.
yeah. And so they would wrap their heads in their plaids, and they
Oh,
would
I love it.
put a stone on their lower belly. And so there is a scholar
Interesting.
named Erin Rowan Laurie, and she also can translate Gaelic and old Gaelic, and she's written extensively on this. But I think it was Erin Rowan Laurie who surmised that they were probably had the stone there, not just so they don't fall asleep, but also to do breathing techniques. So, which you would have to have, so you could recite for however long and project your voice and all of this. So anyway, so that was their training. And yes, incubation, that was done ritually. There were temples where people would go and they would seek answers. So they would go into darkness for usually 3 days, and hopefully come forth with the answer. They would be going into the underworld or the other world, but you had to leave this realm, and you couldn't have the diversions of the day around you. And this is what these poets didn't. They weren't to have any diversions. They were developing this and this and this. But
So this went from Samhain
Samhain
to
to
cuckoo
spring,
time to
spring, cuckoo time. Yeah.
whenever that was. Was that like around Belthana? Was that
No, that was before that. I think that was probably March, late March,
okay?
early April, probably. And then they'd come out and went back to kind of regular life, and, help the family, whatever.
So was there a special, was there fasting? Was there a certain diet that they had to observe? Do you know?
I don't know. I don't know about that, but I do know for their magical training, because this was written in Cormac's glossary, I think it's called. And so there were 3 kind of magical practices that they were taught. And so the first one was the imbas, or imbas Verona. And that is poetic inspiration, but it also means poetic frenzy. So these are the mantic.
Oh, interesting.
So yeah, it was about like going in so just deeply and receiving that inspiration that, you know, you got yourself in such a state that you would end up, they called it mad, dead, or a poet. And so Aaron Rowan Laurie wrote an excellent article called The Speckled Snake, and I think Brother of the Birch or something like this, but it's all about speculating, just like Peter Lamborn Wilson, that these training poets were, and the Druids as well, working with the Amanita muscaria. And it's so
Oh, it's so
interesting
the
because
speckle.
there's all of this lore throughout the Celtic lore. There's so much around a cauldron, and it has a magical brew, and just 3 drops from that brew would give you knowledge of the ages and poetic eloquence, but any more than that could kill you. So Amanita, you got to know how to, I've never worked with it. But, you know, they think it was likely part of Soma. I think it was as well. They don't know really what else was in there. It's all speculation. The Amanita is different than the psilocybin mushroom. And there are experiences where people have ended up in these almost like crystal palace, just places of such beauty and beautiful people, a lot of ladies in like white dresses, which I've touched on in a psilocybin journey. I mean, they're both mushrooms, just different genesis and very different. But in any case, so, and then all these references to these red berries and hazelnuts of wisdom and
salmon, the
salmon
sacred
that ate
salmon.
hazelnuts, yeah, and found by the tree by a sacred pool of water, and also apples, right? And so, meh, just things that make you go, But it wouldn't have been obvious to early scholars because they didn't know like we know today about mushroom psychedelics and amanita, and they didn't have that.
Right.
They wouldn't, there was no 2 and 2 for them to put together. But I'm realizing the more I study this, to me, I'm like, it's so obvious. So in any
Go ahead.
I just want to mention the name of that book by Peter Lamborn Wilson is Plowing the Clouds. I
the
can't remember the
search for
subtitle.
Irish Soma.
Right. It's a wonderful book.
Yeah, it is excellent. Yeah. So he compares the Rig Veda and the stories of Indra with these old Celtic
But what
stories.
is it with the apple?
What do you mean? What is it with the, well, the apple?
The apple is included oftentimes with Snow White ate the apple, and there it's a 5 if you cut it open. The seeds are in a configuration of 5.
Of the pentagram, which
Pentagram.
is the golden mean proportion.
Yeah.
Do you know, you've got the amanita and you've got the salmon, and you've got the hazelnuts and you've got the berries. And you have the apple. So what properties does the apple have?
Well, what I think is all of those, like it's veiled, all of those are actually representing the amanita itself.
Oh, really?
So an apple would look like that red capped amanita.
Okay. Okay.
Possibly.
Okay.
So it's because of course they didn't speak. They didn't just like tell.
No.
They spoke in riddle, metaphor.
They weren't crass.
Yeah, no. And it would be veiled, of course. So with imbas, so they're seeking imbas, and oh gosh, there was, and I'm not sure of the pronunciation. The next, so imbas was that seeking the inspiration. The next one was that ten lada, I think it's called ten lada. And so what they would do with that is they would eat a red fleshed animal of either a pig, a cat, or a dog. So they would eat that. And so that was also taking in sort of the spirit of that animal, or thought to be anyway. But that red flesh also could have been amanita. And they would go into darkness, and then they would kind of do this almost fractal like poetic working where they're divining, they're getting information in terms of who should be the next king, that kind of thing. And so, interestingly, that the poet who's doing the divination would eat that, go into the house of darkness, and then there'd be someone sort of another poet kind of overseeing him. And he would be in there for up to 3 days until he had the answer, and they would come out with the answer. But also with Amanita, you don't want to be in a lot of bright light, apparently, the Amanita. You're better to be in darkness. And anyway, so I highly recommend reading that article by Erin. Just look up Erin Rowan Laurie, The Speckled.
Aaron, like A-A-R-N.
Her
Oh,
website
Erin,
is called
E-R-I-N?
Pardon me?
Erin, E-R-I-N?
Yeah, actually it's E-R-Y-N, Erin Rowan Laurie. I mean, she's just
L-O-R-R-I-E or Y?
Laurie, I think it's Laurie.
Laurie, oh.
Laurie, sorry, Erin Rowan Laurie. And I think the website is CNET, SEANET.com, as I recall.
Okay.
Well, if you can find it and send it to us, we can put it in the show notes.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. She's a treasure. Oh my goodness. She's done a lot of research on that. And then the third magical practice that they did was the psychometry. And I am not sure how to pronounce that yet. I was gonna actually ask Sean Pedrick O'Donoghue and just say, hey,
Could you help me?
I can't figure this out. I'm like looking at the pronunciations, but it's like Dechetel do Henab, something like that. But I know I'm not pronouncing it because again, they're very specific. And if there's certain combinations, then the vowels or the consonants sound a different way. In any case, but that was like psychometry, where they would use their staff or the whorls on the fingers, the ends of the fingers, to touch something, and they would receive all the information. Just like a psychic, some psychics will work for police departments, FBI, and they're given something that belonged to the missing person or whatever, and then they get all the information. Again, this is all stuff we all have this in us, but it's of course not developed.
I don't.
Well,
I know, I'm just being
it's
played.
there. Yeah. But so yeah, that was the last probably 4 years of their training was the magic, the divination.
So that's another interesting thing you bring up is that it's not just poetry to whatever, sing the praise of whomever or whatever, but it was actual very practical. And it had to do with the structure of the society, as you said, who could be king, what laws need to be enacted. And this is also in the ancient Greek tradition, the same thing.
Yeah.
Where you would go into incubation, someone like Parmenides or Empedocles, and there's a number of them when you would come back. It would come back and you bring laws back, that were needed, and they were divine laws, and they're not to be messed with.
Yeah, so he talks about justice, she who demands exact returns.
Yeah, there's no arguing with them.
Yeah, justice is a goddess. Truth is a goddess, in the Greek tradition.
Parmenides had
Aletheia.
this wonderful poem that he wrote, and talks about justice and how he comes out with the laws given to him by her.
Yeah.
And now we just have tatters of that.
But we still have, but the bones are there. I mean, we still have Columba sitting on top of the Capitol building. I mean, it's still there, or, everybody's got a different take on the Statue of Liberty, but it's still, you still got Mercury on their dimes, or used to have Mercury on our dimes.
Roosevelt time.
Now we got that trade of Roosevelt. But anyway, but it's still in the bones of things here.
Yes.
It is, and that's the hope that we have, because all of these documents that we have are unique in the world, and they're not completely gone, and they're in the DNA of Americans. They
Mhm.
really are. When people who really are steeped in that start to speak, they carry it.
Yes.
It's in the DNA of Americans.
Mhm.
It's there. So there's some hope.
Yeah, I actually, it's interesting. I mean, I have hope. At the same time, I can see it's awful and it's gonna get worse for a while. And again, I think back to this mushroom journey that I had where I was speaking with the fairy queen. And when I was asking her kind of just about all this mess, she said very succinctly, the consequence when one forgets.
Mm,
Hmm.
I mean, we've forgotten.
right.
We forget, it's mess. And then the fates came in and they said, because I was seeing what was going to happen, they were
Mm.
showing me and I was sobbing.
Hmm.
And they said, death comes first and then the birth. That is how it is on earth. And it is. We're in a death cycle.
Yeah, we are. Yeah.
And there will be a rebirth. And there are always opportunistic people or forces that when things are in chaos and turmoil because things are changing, they will come in and try to co-opt. That's exactly
Yeah.
what we're seeing.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
And that's why that the book ended with that last poem that I know you want me to read, which would be a good way to end this, um, which I call the real estate. And that was from a mushroom journey, and it just was so, I was deep in the realms. And again, like I go in there and I'm like, you guys, we need help. Like it's
Right.
gas out here.
Yeah.
And and I was, I think just, you know, mourning for
Sure.
just what's been lost.
Sure.
And then that piece came through. And it's a very important piece to remember that at the end of the day, we are immortal. We are spirit. You can't kill energy. This is a temporary container. And that's a wisdom that we have to understand as well. It's all temporal.
Mhm.
Everything is always changing. And because that's what genius, creative genius, isn't static. Things change. And yeah, so, but I know, I mean, it's already, we've seen just shocking things. And it's,
Things you can't unsee.
Yeah.
yeah,
And then I try to think about one of our favorite pre-Socratic philosopher, Empedocles, and he has the world running on the pump of love and strife. And in fact, love is Aphrodite, strife he doesn't quite name. But the fact is that love enchants and binds us,
Mhm.
according to the way he discusses it. And
Yes.
strife, as painful as it can be, is what frees us. And and that's what, so that's why they, you call this an apocalypse and an unveiling. This is how you see what's been going on. And that's the time. And it's it's not even ripping off band-aids. It's like, pulling out sutures and whatever. It's not easy, but it's really, it's so many people are coming to at least see what's going on, what they've been blinded to forever. And that's what, and of course, truth in Greek is aletheia. Lethe is the lake of forgetfulness. And
Mhm.
so it is to truth is to remember, or then again to put back together to remember.
Mm.
Works on that level too, so
Yeah.
so so as exciting as things are and as painful as things are, you have to pull back from from the fear of looking at what's going on. And then poetry like yours and your book help us pull back and get a much better perspective on what we're going through.
Yes, and to your point, another thing the fates said was, "Let the boil drain the pus, so healing can come
Mm,
to all of us.
Yes.
It's not pretty, dear, we know, and we feel your heart's sorrow." And then they said, "But death comes first, and then the birth. This is how
Mm,
it is on earth."
mhm,
So it's like, yeah, all the shit's coming to the surface, and we're seeing. When we, you know what, we're seeing a lot of things that have been cast out that people don't wanna see,
mhm.
that they have to face, and that's, Jung would call that's the shadow.
it is. That's
Yeah,
exactly what it is.
there's
Yeah.
no arguing with the
Yeah.
mother.
Yeah.
She always gets
Yeah.
the last word, doesn't she?
Yes, she does. She she knows best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, should we launch into that poem? And that would
Yeah,
be a really nice closure. And
yeah.
then if you like, you could even say a few words about it afterwards or not, whatever you feel is appropriate.
Alright. Call that up here.
And how did this one come to you? Was there
This
circumstance
was
around it?
on, this was a mushroom journey. Was it last I think it was last September. And so this was an excerpt from that journey where I was just, yeah, I was just feeling was very upset about what is upsetting so many of us, right?
Yeah.
And and then this is what came in, and it's just, I just think it's so beautifully powerful. And I will say also, I like to go into the mushroom realms on the first day of the year because my girls are always off on their own, and so I've got the place to myself. I usually go in by myself. And, so I, get the place dark because I do it during the day, but I close the curtains and everything, and I went in, and, for the first time in many years, no poetry came in,
Mm,
but I was with, and I talked to you guys afterwards, but I was with, she felt to me like the sovereign queen of earth. Oh gosh, hang on, let me just plug this in. And she said to me, wait, let me get this plugged in. Sorry. There we go. She said, there will be no poetry today. She said, the book is complete.
oh, interesting.
So I knew what that meant. And, it's like, you're not, but you're good. you know, this last declaration, if you will, ends the book. So it's like an exclamation mark, if you will, but a very beautiful one. And then but that was an extraordinary, extraordinary journey. And not a day has gone by that I have not thought about that, about where I was with her. So just so beautiful.
And yet this poem did come.
Yeah. Well, this came the prior September, but what she was
Oh,
saying
oh,
was, yeah, she was saying for this recent journey of mine a few months back, there'll be
oh,
no poetry today. The
oh,
book is complete.
oh, I see.
Because by then I knew this was going to be the end of the book, but I was also thinking, well, if more messages come in, I'll incorporate them. And she was like, nope.
No, enough.
Nope, the
Yeah.
file is done.
Yes. All right. Despite the troubles in this world, despite the evil they have hurled, despite their techniques they're proud of, they can't destroy the sacred dove. They would claim it as their own, they so desire for that throne. But they cannot touch that seat. It can't be taken by great feats. It's in a place that they can't enter. This the home of ancient mentors. This the place of wisdom's light. This a fire that burns bright. All who come with heart of gold will be greeted by the old mentors of the ages past, who hold with care the knowledge vast. This place they cannot destroy. It's found in every girl and boy, and man and woman of this earth. Its light shines in every birth, found within if humbly sought. This is why they just cannot effectively put out its light, regardless of their daunting might. Truth will win out in the end, in spite of how the darkness bends and twists and perverts endlessly. Yet truth prevails, 'twill set you free. The wicked cannot take that throne. Lies and deceit are all they've known. It can't be bartered, bought, or sold. It can't be stolen by the bold. This a code they cannot break. This a riddle they can't make into a formula to sell. Entries barred to those who dwell within the realm of greed and hate. This throne is the real estate. So yeah.
Indeed.
And I'll quickly say also something that they mentioned the dove in there. And I read later the dove is associated with Bridget, with the she. So
That makes
Is
sense.
that so?
yeah, I did not know that because we think of the dove as a Christian symbol, and it
Right.
is
Right.
also, it's one of the symbols.
Pre-Christian, obviously,
Yes, yeah. These symbols are ancient.
you know.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think that's a good way to end what has been just a wonderful conversation as usual with you guys.
This is like a good meal when you're hungry.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Very satisfying, deeply satisfying.
Aw,
Thank you,
thank
Shonagh.
thank you, Shonagh, for hanging out and for inaugurating our new series of Good Craics.
Good
And-
press. And thank you
and-
to the she
Thank you to the she and
and the
to
fili.
all the
Fila.
and you know, and all the teachers just going way back and back and back, and maybe a handful of them were us one time, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. I do often wonder that, when I'm with you guys, I'm like, oh, there's a backstory here with us. I'd love to know.
The comfort level is so complete
No.
that there must be something that
Yeah, it's the old friend vibe.
There
Like
was at least,
Michael.
yeah, at least some soups were stirred in the cauldrons at one point. So,
Yeah,
so thank you,
yeah.
Shonagh. Thank you, Krys.
You're welcome, Steve Crimi.
And yeah, so we'll end it here then.
Anything
Right.
else?
Thanks everybody for listening.
We're just a
And-
reminder that Logosophia Books.com. You can find Shonagh's books there.
Shonagh's books
And
there.
Steve Crimi's book,
And
Katabatic Wind.
Shonagh's two other books.
It's an ill wind that blows no good.
That's such a good book. Oh my
It is
God.
great. It is great. And in the Irish tradition, we'd say it's grand.
And yes.
It's grand. A book of nice, wonderful essays with great. Oh, look at this. This is Yamantaka. Is that Yamantaka?
Yamantaka. Yeah,
Yamantaka.
that's an essay called The Death of Death. And
Yeah.
it's Death doing his final dance,
Yeah.
showing that there is no death.
Yeah.
Right.
Hamlet and Arjuna handle crisis.
Right.
So very good. Thank you, everyone,
Thank
for
you.
your attention and interest, and may this be the first in a nice long series of
Yeah.
chit chats. Good crack.
Okay.
Okay.